I'm Dawn Wisher.
And I'm Katie Metz, and this is How to Teach College. We back. Here we are.
2020.
It's 2020. Happy New Year, everybody.
Year of the decade.
Of the decade.
Yes.
First podcast of the decade, depending on how you think about the decade. We're a month late.
Oh, gosh, now my brain is going there. So I didn't know there was questions about that.
So allow me to just refresh your memory about who we are. I'm Katie Metz.
And I'm Dawn Wisher.
And we are still How to Teach College, even though we've been in our midwinter slumber for a minute here.
A little bit of hibernating is okay.
It's okay. So we're back. And we are going to do something a little bit different for our first episode of the spring semester, which is just kind of do a quick hit here to highlight a piece of research that we saw recently that we thought was really interesting and that would apply to you all. So in early January, Dawn found an article called Drawing is the Fastest, Most Effective Way to Learn, according to new research by Jessica Stillman. She's a contributor for Inc.com. And we'll put that in our podcast notes so you don't have to memorize that title. But we thought that it was a pretty cool way to spark a discussion about helping students and ourselves get organized for the new semester and start thinking about recall specifically, but study techniques in general.
Yeah, I was excited. I saw this right before, I think, day one of the semester. And so I already had an activity where I was actually asking them to draw in class. And so it worked out pretty well. And it tags on to the research that probably listeners might be familiar with. I know I always ask my students and they say they're familiar with it. I think we've mentioned it on here before, but that it is better. You do have better recall, make better connections when you hand write your notes versus typing them. But yeah, the newest research is taking it even to the next level of now drawing your notes.
Of actually drawing. And so the first thing I think about when I think about this sort of research is like, oh shit, I'm an accountant. Excuse me, but oh shit. And one of the things that this study points out is that it doesn't matter how good at art you are, how much of an artist you either perceive yourself to be or you actually can prove you are, that just the idea of engaging your brain in a new way is really helpful in you understanding material. So the article and then the study that the article draws from, I get it, draws from, is called
what you did there.
The Surprisingly Powerful Influence of Drawing on Memory. It was published at the end of August 2018 in Current Directions in Psychological Science from a group of Canadian authors. And so they basically, their premise is a picture is worth 1,000 words. But I think the idea goes beyond just the study techniques piece of it. I was kind of thinking back to my own experiences with drawing, which is I like to mind map a lot. I like to think about my schedule for the week, not in terms of a linear, oh no, what if I don't check the box, but how everything pulls together to make my week a little bit smoother. And it kind of resonated just as a habit. I think that we can not just teach our students, but get into ourselves as we're thinking about organization for the new semester.
Well, and as you said that, I just now remembered, and we may have even mentioned this before on the podcast, but I went to one of the CITL sessions, Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning, and they talked about a visual syllabus. And what they said that you could do is just think about how your class does connect, because likely they're all of these pieces, but they do connect. There is a rhyme to the reason. And can you create that visually? And so they had us do that. So I do a lot, I think I've said on here, with ethos, pathos, and logos, and sort of where does that look like and where do these pieces fall and how do they connect? But if you can draw that, and I'm not good at this either, but create it on PowerPoint, for example, then you can take that image and put it on your syllabus and help the students see then how everything sort of maps together. But even from a teaching perspective of putting the syllabus together, putting the class together, it helps you maybe look at it and go, whoa, why am I doing that there where it might help my students more here? You start to see the connections that you might take for granted.
Yes, that's a really good point of kind of how I firmly believe this, and we've talked about this on previous episodes, but the way that we frame our classes is the way students learn about the learning outcomes in our classes. And I'm really cognizant of that. And I actually just thought about an example of what you were saying, which is that I did a summer course development institute. And for me, the most helpful thing about that, it was led by some of the people who also do these visual syllabi like workshops at CITL here, the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning. But one of the things I did was I just mapped out what are my 4 main learning objectives. What are the 4 points I need to make in this class? And then how do we organize content around it? And I ended up rearranging a lot in my class just because I looked at it and was like, oh, that's way too much in that module. Or, oh, that doesn't make sense. Why would I teach them about this topic before I moved on to a different topic? I think it also, the drawing piece of it makes us more cognizant of interestingness in our classes. Yeah. So if we're thinking about teaching history or something that has a much more linear timeline or a skills set that builds on itself, how are we actually using a creative format, I will say, to make it interesting and effective for our students rather than just like kind of that baseline. We're going to start at the very beginning of the history of time and move our way down, or we have to start with the foundation, but what is the foundation? Right. So I think that's a pretty interesting way to translate it. How do you think?
Yeah, well, I think a few things are happening here, but at least 2 that I'm hearing you say, and that is just understanding, and not that I am a neuroscientist and understand how the brain works, but per the research, that it is utilizing our brain in a different way, or I think it's even utilizing both sides of the brain is what's happening. Yeah. But it is that real active learning. So actually, there's a few articles in Inc. magazine that talked about this, but one even said it requires you to concentrate while taking notes to better understand what's being said. So you can kind of see if you are taking notes, handwritten or typing, you could go into autopilot because you're either copying PowerPoint slides or literally just sort of on autopilot writing down, what the professor says, or you can be really active in synthesizing that information and then drawing it. It's really making you use your brain and concentrate and be active rather than just on autopilot.
Yes, that's exactly what the original study that this article points to says, actually. And the article highlights about that study that and I think this is really cool and really surprising, just 40 seconds of low quality sketching not only allows you to learn more, but allows you to learn it faster.
That's interesting.
And so I've done this before in my accounting classes, but students don't love me for this. but it makes sense now that I'm like, hey, the research.
Now you can point to it and then,
research confirmed. I told you guys this. But anyway, just kind of, sit down and map out what you know and what you don't know. Or think about the progress, how all of these terms fit together. Just getting students, especially those maybe who are not inclined to naturally draw first. How do you help the subject fit together? Yeah. And you can do that by asking students to figure out what they don't know first, and then move into something like that. Where are the blanks?
That's really how I used it on day 1, which again, I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, I was going to do the thing, but now I'm like, hey, there's research that shows why we're doing the thing.
So now you're really doing
the thing. Now we're definitely doing the thing. So we talk about the transactional communication model, and I've said in here or on the podcast that I don't have any quizzes or exams, but the assessments are presentations. But you still want to, hopefully they're curious learners, they want to be better presenters, but also just want to know more. And so we're talking about the communication model. I just tell them, here are all of the pieces, how would you put these together? So they end up working with 5 other people in the class, and I just give them a sheet of paper and a pen, and they start to make these connections. So some will actually make a proper model, like what I end up having on my next slide. Or some might even say, well, it's kind of like basketball. You have to have, it's kind of like the message is the ball. And so they have fun with it, where they will end up drawing, a basketball court. But it really doesn't matter. The point is that they're using their brains in that active way, and that they're not just listening to me, that they're working with other people, that they are engaged, they're doing something that I'll put in quotes fun. I think it's fun, but it's just that very active learning. It's kind of moving around, it's using their whole body, and they're contributing to the discussion that way.
Yeah, and that really actually draws back, good segue, to the hypothesis that the original researchers drew. Again, I'm so punny today on a Monday. Which is that the reason it's helpful is that the first thing you have to do when you go through this process is figure out how to draw it to begin with, and how does it come across to you in your own mind, and then how does that translate to paper, which is exactly what you're saying your students are doing without even realizing it.
Right.
So I'm going to wrap up this quick hit of current research in how to teach college by reminding you that people have been teaching college for a lot longer than we have. And so I'm going to give a shout out to our old department chair, our old boss, Sue Vargo, who commented on your Facebook post about this. Mapping has always been a good way to help us think. So mind mapping has been around forever.
Right.
And now we know kind of why it's helpful for us.
Exactly.
So today, at least, I think this is how we teach college.